Welcome back. It is 9:16 on your Wednesday morning. Parents, listen up, especially if you have a 10-year-old like I do at home. Ever have any issues with a sassy kid? If you do, you aren't alone. Now, here with some tips for dealing with some potentially bad behavior, from being fresh to a lot worse. We have Dr. Amy Alomar back with us this morning. Good to have you along.
Thanks for having me.
And when I sat down, we just went right into overdrive, ramped it up 0 to 60. Okay, help me, please, because I have two wonderful kids at home, but I do have a 10-year-old, and the sassy factor is starting to ramp up to overdrive itself.
Yeah, just starting.
Yeah. What are the signs, and at what point should I be looking to see if I can curtail this a bit?
Yeah, so there's a fine line between, right? Like, you want them to develop as independent individuals. That's our job as parents, is to raise independent kids. But we also want to set really high expectations, and we want to enforce those. So you want to have some logical consequences and be very consistent. So if your kid is doing something that's inappropriate or disrespectful, then you need to have that conversation right away, nip it in the bud, and have some logical consequences.
Is the worst thing to do to say, oh, it's just kids being kids?
Yes. I don't know if that's the worst thing, but that's not a good thing. Yeah, so you really, you're the parent, and it's so hard, but you have to remember your job is to keep them safe. That's your first job. And your second job is to raise them as, responsible, independent adults eventually.
So how do you have the conversation? Is it just let's talk about what you did, or do you go right into discipline or negative reinforcement, as the case may be, because you're now punishing?
Yeah, and so actually a conversation is often enough. And I think so often we go from letting it go and being really lenient and then straight to punishment. And there's a lot of gray area in between, and conversation is a huge part of that. So if you can, talking about it, and sometimes the consequence is that conversation with mom or dad.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we have those talks all the time. Yep. At the dinner table, we have them after dinner, and I always have that moment that I think that, all right, I've broken through, and then the next day, we're back to square one. So what do you do there? And
there's no silver bullet, right? Parenting, as we just said before the show, right? Nobody's ever parented your kid in this day, in this moment. And so you may have that great conversation and they understand, but the next day, we all repeat mistakes, and it's 10,000 hours to become expert, right? So they need some reminders and really following through on the consequences that you decide on. And that may be something that your child helps you decide on in the beginning. And if that's not working, then you start with the other consequences that you kind of impose on them.
Well, let's go from there, because now the concern is, okay, it starts with maybe a little back talk, and then it becomes signs that your child is not only disobeying you, but really starting to cause trouble. You want to nip it in the bud, but how do you escalate the conversation or the punishments if need be?
Right, and so when your kid is misbehaving in the home or with you, that is very normal behavior. They're kind of testing boundaries, and you expect that, right? And that's kind of their job, and it's your job to enforce. Now, if they're starting to do it outside of the home, or you're starting to get some bad behaviors at school or outside of even school, then you have to really come down on them, and you have to allow the external factors, right? So if there's a consequence they have to face at school, you need to help them own up to that.
My mother was a school teacher for many years and taught me this, and said, and we of similar age grew up knowing that we were fearing mom, dad, and teacher. And if teacher said something, you got grounded for it. But now it's a little different. So when you get that call from the teacher saying, oh, not my Timmy, that's the wrong answer.
It is. And so, it's not different. We may be seeing parents sort of more lenient, but it's actually, we should still be backing up the consequences at the school. And so you want to make sure you can be your child's advocate while helping them own up to their responsibility.
Okay, so speaking of owning up, and this is the final question, let's talk about when it gets, and I should say, if it gets really bad, and the stuff now becomes breaking the law. How do you give up at that point and admit you failed as a parent? No, I'm kidding. No. But what can you do to still walk it back a bit and still be effective in raising now the tween that's become the teenager that is now turning into a problem child?
Yeah, and so those conversations are crucial now. So hopefully you've been having them, and it's not new, but it's not too late.
Okay.
So the conversation is key, and you do stand by your child, and you are their advocate. However, you stand by them while you force them to face and own up to what they've done. And so you are walking them into the police station, or you are helping them through their community service, or whatever that consequences, and you're helping them. And it is hard, and it's easy to beat yourself up.
No parent wants to be in this position, but it does happen. So be prepared, and the conversation starts young. Keep having it.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, gosh, only 3 minutes. We could talk for another 30. If you want more information, look us up on the Fox 61 page, and we'll hook you up with Dr. Amy. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, good stuff. And I'm only slightly more nervous than I was when we started this interview. Thank you. Appreciate